Hi guys, John Florez again, part 2 of the Untold Stories. This will be kind of fun too, I hope you enjoy it. I want to start with Bell Records, where I became a staff producer after briefly being an independent with Five Flights Up, Sisters Love, and Linda Seals. Okay, I told you in my autobiography that Larry Utah, the president of Bell, signed me to be a staff producer after I apologized for his not liking, I know that sounds funny, Linda Seals. He was holding that against me, saying John produced Linda Seals and I don't want him to be our staff producer. Well, I went to a conference where he was at. I said, please, I'm sorry we didn't agree on that artist, but I'd still like to be your staff producer. And he said, okay. And I went to work for Bell Records at many times the salary and many times the royalty rate that I had anywhere else prior. And yet, during my time there, between a year and 2 years, I had no hits. So a 4% royalty of zero royalties is $0. So it was tough. I did 2 or 3 singles while I was there, and that was the extent of really the released product that I did while I was at Bell. They were cute, catchy little things that I hoped would fit the Bell narrative that they were. I had Tony Orlando and Dawn and all kinds of cute, catchy little acts at the time, Partridge Family. So I tried a couple of those with no success whatsoever. I also, now this is embarrassing, I also purchased a master on a young woman singer whose husband, he was a director of, I think, of the Twilight Zone TV series, and her name was Jerry Laird. Jack Laird was the TV producer. And that single did absolutely nothing. But what I'm embarrassed about is that as I purchased that master, I, at the same time, turned down a master that my attorney Chuck Hurwitz brought me. And that master that I turned down was Tony Basil's Hey Mickey. Here's a little excerpt. Okay, now that was embarrassing. I should have signed it. It was a big hit. I should have known better. And then several years later, Chuck Hurwitz and I chatted, and I said, oh, by the way, Chuck, remember my turning down Hey Mickey? And he said, I'm surprised that you'd admit it and remember it, or remember it and admit it, whatever. So, yes, I did. I'll never forget it. At the same period of time, I made another bonehead move. And this is really unforgivable. I had Daryl Hall of Hall & Oates sing on a track that I had produced on Five Flights Up, and I loved his voice. So I said, Daryl, you don't need your partner, John Oates. You know, you write your own material, you sing lead on all your own material. Can I just sign you as a solo artist? And he said, you mean dump my partner, John? And I said, well, kinda, yeah. He said, well, I'm not going to do that. I will forever be embarrassed that I did that and didn't sign them as well, which is just so stupid. They went on to sign with Atlantic Records and then had their major success with RCA. Okay, another real foul up while I was sitting there at Bell Records making a great salary, $36,000 a year, which back then was really good for a staff producer. Tom Draper at RCA, the head of the black division, was earning $40,000 in a top executive position, and I was earning $36,000, but no hits, no royalties, no nothing. It was just kind of a shame. But I liked working with John Rossica, my boss, and I liked working with Harvey Cooper, my RCA friend, and eventually my partner independently. That was all fun. And then I loved having this agent come in to our offices at Bell, Wally Amos, and he was an agent for William Morris Agency. And there's an act he wanted me to hear up in San Francisco, who was a minister, and who eventually was picked up by Bell Records, but not by me. And Wally came in one day and said, John, nice to see you, and how are you doing, all this. And by the way, I'm thinking of leaving my job at William Morris because I got these cookies that I keep taking around to all the record companies, and everybody seems to love my cookies, so, I'm going to start something called Famous Amos. I said, oh, Wally, don't do that. You're too good an agent. A cookie company? Are you kidding? You can kind of tell that I wasn't the brightest bulb in the batch. Okay, we already know I was naive and too soft for the business, but as an executive, making executive decisions of what to purchase, hey, Mickey, missed that one, and Wally Amos, Famous Amos, cookies? Nah. I ran into Wally several years later. I think it was 1995 on vacation in Hawaii, and there he was in Honolulu, and we hugged, and I said, do you remember what I told you? And he said, oh, hell yes, John. That was really funny. And okay, it's funny, but it is embarrassing. But I told you now. I told you. So moving to the only act that I did an album on for Bell Records, it was a group built like Sergio Mendes's group, Brazil 66. It was on A&M. This was an Acapulco-based group, Los Dominique, and they had two excellent women singers and lots of percussion and just a fun group to watch. And they were quite the hit down in Acapulco. And Bell Records, I got a call from Dave Carrico, who was second in command in New York to Larry Utah, and he said, I want you to go down and see Los Dominique and then call me back. So I went down there, I went to Acapulco, and I saw this group, and they're a wonderful live group. Very high energy, percussion based Latin vocal group and band, and I enjoyed their show a lot. So the next morning, they and I, the group, Los Dominique, and I went to breakfast, and I said, I've thought about it all night, and it's just not what I do, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pass on you as an act. I'm not going to sign you to Bell Records. And the leader of the group says to me, John, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I said, oh, really? What's that? He said, Larry Utah and Dave Carrico, they'd had some drinks, but they signed us already. And we're already on Bell Records, and you're our producer. That's why they sent you down. Oh, okay. So I'm going to try to make this as quick as I can. This is an interesting one. So while I'm there, I hadn't been to Mexico before. I had some sort of stomach issues with the food there. So I thought, okay, I got to come back here and rehearse these guys. And next time I come down, I'm going to kind of eat what they do. I'm going to follow their lead because they're all healthy as clams. So I'm going to do that. So we set up some time. I flew back down from Los Angeles, Bell Records office in Los Angeles, to Holiday Inn Acapulco, and we started rehearsals. And the first night out, they took me to dinner, and I had their clams on the shell, or whatever you call it, I don't know what you call them, open shell. And everything they ate, I ate, and I had to call the doctor at the Holiday Inn, and I was sick. I mean, really, really sick. So the next morning, I called John Rossica in Los Angeles, my boss at Bell Records, and I said, John, I can't do this again down here. I thought I was a little ill last time I was here, but this time I'm really sick. Please don't make me come back down here again. And he said, no problem, John. What we'll do is we'll get visas for all the guys and the couple of women in the group, and we'll send them up to LA, and you can record them at Hyder's like you're used to doing, and everything will be just fine. You'll never have to go back to Mexico again. And I said, oh, thank you, John. That's great news. Okay, well, they couldn't get him the visas. So Ray Cork, my arranger for the Friends of Distinction, Larry Cox, soon to be the multi-platinum producer for the Jefferson Starship, He was chief engineer at Wally Heider Recording at the time. He joined as engineer, Ray as arranger and kind of co-producer, and me in Mexico City to produce an entire album on Los Dominique. So this took us probably a couple of weeks, and we had a blast doing it. This time I ate French onion soup and toast the entire time and did not get sick, thank you very much. Well, until the second to the last day of recording, when they brought in street vendor tacos and we all had them and they were delicious, and boom, by the time I was on the plane to LA, sick again. But the rest of the time they're healthy, having fun, making good music, and something I had never done before, kind of percussion-oriented, Latin, wonderful stuff. Okay, so I'm going to omit one of the big stories that happened down there in the background because it's salacious and you don't want to hear that. It was nothing to do with the group. So forget that. They were just wonderful. Had to do with my naivete again, and we're just going to let that sit right there. But the story I can tell you is that it seems like they want to party all the time down there. They want to celebrate before you record, after you record, during when you record. And there was a party that was a pre-recording party that was at a home of the lead singer's mother's, I think, and everybody was gathered there, plus a whole bunch of other people invited to celebrate the recording of Los Dominique's first American album on top of that, which is really special. So it turns out there were two rooms in this home that the party seemed to be gathered in. One was the straight-laced room, which is where I was naturally, and the other was kind of the whoopee party room, where I wasn't. Turns out Ray Cork is in the party room. He's seated at a table, and there's a woman that had come to the event with a chaperone. In fact, the chaperone was an older gentleman, brought two women, one on each arm, to this party. It turns out Ray and this one woman are kind of getting along, and they each have their hands on the other person's knee. And they're doing this. It all looks very tame to me, but Martha, one of the lead singers of the group, comes in and says, "John, in Mexico, this is not acceptable. Those two women came with that escort, and they are kind of off limits, so tell Ray to knock it off and keep his hands to himself." So I go in the other room, and I'm telling this to Ray, who's still got his hand there, as does she, while I'm telling him this. And while I'm telling him to knock it off, the escort, the elderly gentleman, comes into the room, and Ray responds, takes the woman's hand off of his leg, brings it up like this, and says, "Now this line right here, that's your heart line." And then he goes into about a 10-minute palm reading of the hand he just took off of his knee. Well, after that, a whole bunch of people in this room line up for palm readings, and Ray's reading everybody's palms. We're in the car on the way home, and I said, "Ray, I had no idea you had that gift. You're really good at that." And he said, "John, I made the whole thing up. I just didn't know how to get out of it." That happened while recording Los Dominique's album. Okay, get back to LA. The album is fully mastered, and I get a call from Larry Utah, president of Bell Records, who is in town. He's staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and he wants me to meet him around the pool to tell me what the update is on Los Dominique's album. So I did. I went and saw him there, and Larry said, "John, we couldn't be more thrilled. We are so happy with this album. Thank you. I know you guys had to go through a lot to get this done down there, but thank you. From me to you, just a personal thank you. Well done." Well, it turns out the group was calling repeatedly saying, "When's our album coming out?" And after it didn't come out for a while, I called back east, and it was probably Dave Carrico that I spoke to, and I said, "When is the Los Dominique's album going to be released?" And he said, "John, we decided to shelve the whole project." Boy, that was a lot of money to send us down there, put us up, do all that recording of a full album, all the overdubs, all the everything, and it never came out. The only thing that I can show you on Los Dominique is something we didn't do, which is that live clip I just showed you a piece of. Oh my goodness. And in terms of just international relations, I know it's no big deal, but this was one of the top acts in Mexico, and I feel they didn't get a fair shake on this. Why not, like some of the other albums that I had that were unreleased, why not, particularly with this one, release it? If it does nothing, release it. Don't print a lot of copies, just release it. Give them their moment in the sun. They need reviews and Billboard, they need all the stuff that accompanies it. Then if it doesn't sell, that's fine. If you're not promoting it, that's fine. Nobody will know the difference. At least their album came out and got a little bit of press. No, it never happened. And to this day, I'm very sad about that. I love those guys. They're a wonderful group, great human beings, warm, hospitable, loving. Larry and Ray and I had a blast working with you. Thank you for that privilege. Toward the end of my tenure at Bell Records, I asked for a pay cut. Doesn't that sound like John? Oh my God, what planet was I on? I asked for a pay cut to produce Michael Jarrett, the singer-songwriter that wrote the single for Elvis, I'm Leavin', and I wanted to produce an album on him, and Bell Records said no. So I said, I got an offer from Playboy Records, they want me to produce them, I'm not allowed to because I work for you, and I'm willing to take a pay cut over it, which I did. And remember, I wasn't making any royalty money anyway, and I got paid well for doing Michael Jarrett's album, which did absolutely nothing. Now, one quick aside on the Michael Jarrett album is that it turns out in Hyder Studio 1, which was often a mix-down room, there was a switch on the wall, a manual switch, either on or off, for loudness control. That is not volume, that is boosting the high end and the low end like on an amplifier. If you push the loudness button, the extreme high end and the extreme low end are boosted. Okay, that is not supposed to be on when you are mixing unless you're a client that wants to hear your stuff kind of hyped up and overly present. Okay, well, we finished mixing, Johnny Golden and I, my lifelong friend and mastering engineer after that. Johnny Golden comes to me and says, John, there was a mistake. That loudness switch was on the entire time we mastered. So that album is vocal shy. And even if you try to use EQ to bring it up some in the mastering process, we were cooked and there was no budget to go back in and remix an entire album. So when all is said and done, the Playboy album was a bit of a disaster because I took less pay from Bell while I did it. It didn't get promoted and it didn't sound right. So as Michael knows, but I'll say it again, Michael Jarrett, I am so sorry that I buried the voice on the mixdowns for your album. Wasn't my fault, it was Hyder's, but I did it. I'm sorry. I've remastered the Jarrett album on this YouTube site and you can listen to it, and I've done everything I can to pop the vocal out a little more. Okay, but such is life. That's what happened. Last but not least, there are a couple of artists that I rehearsed that I never got to produce, and both of them are kind of interesting stories. One of the artists was John Biner. John Biner was a vocal impressionist like Rich Little. He could imitate anybody, and he was big in Las Vegas, on the Tonight Show, all that stuff. Steve Bender sent him out to me, and then we went to Steve's office and sat around the piano, and John Biner pretended in the voice of Richard Nixon, the president at the time, to sing Aretha Franklin's Respect. R-E-S-P-E-C-T, I am not a crook. Sock it to me, sock it to me, sock it to me. You would have had to have been there, but it was hilarious, and I thought it was probably one of those novelty records that could hit. But Steve Bender and Bell Records decided not to let me go ahead and cut that. That would have been fun. But we did get to rehearse it, and I wish I had taped the rehearsal to play it for you. I don't have it, and I'm sorry. The other artist I didn't get to produce, the story around that is her name's Audrey Landers. And you know her name because she became a big star on the TV show Dallas. Okay, at the time she was unknown, and I don't remember who sent me there to rehearse her, but Darnell and I went, sat around a piano at her house, and rehearsed a song called Go to Pieces. That's a Peter and Gordon song, British group from the 60s. I go to pieces and I want to cry over you. Wonderful song, had never been done country, so I had Audrey lean her voice a little toward country and sing Go to Pieces. Little piece of trivia for you, somebody actually decided to do that tune 4 or 5 years later and had a chart record with it. We were ahead of our times. That's in the plus column for me in my decision making at the time. I needed all the pluses I could get. So we're rehearsing Go to Pieces, and the phone rings and her mother comes in, and her mother is her manager. Her mother is Audrey Lander's manager. And she says, Audrey, you have a phone call on the other line. So Audrey excuses herself, goes in, I hear her talking, and she comes into Darnielle and me around the piano and says, oh my God, I've just been offered a part on Dallas and I'm not going to be able to do a recording deal, John. I'm really sorry. So even though she sang it great, even though we had a tune that was destined to be remade, but almost doesn't count in horseshoes, does it? Nah, we just missed that one by a skosh. And Audrey went on to become a star. Okay, so that's kind of it. I am going to withhold more Worst of the Street samples for you. Very popular on the last video, but this has gone on too long. This is the Bell Records time frame where there was all kinds of activity and absolutely no success. Hefty paycheck, no success. The next thing that happened was Rock the Boat, and then everything changed. Okay, that's it for now. You guys take care. Thanks again as always for watching. Bye-bye.